Daniel Harris lived on the lower decks of a large space station that circled a glowing blue star. He worked every day as a mechanic. His hands were always covered in grease and his clothes smelled of oil and metal. Daniel was not a man of wealth or power. He was a simple man who wanted only to raise his daughter Claire and give her a safe home. The station was crowded with many species, traders, and travelers. Daniel often fixed broken machines, patched up old shuttles, and repaired cleaning drones that rolled through the corridors. His days were busy, but at night when the work slowed, he and Claire would sit in their small workshop laughing and talking. The workshop was not grand, but it was warm with the sound of tools and the glow of small lights. One quiet evening, while Daniel was sorting through piles of spare parts, he heard a faint sound. At first he thought it was a rat crawling through the vents, but then the sound came again. It was soft scratching, like small hands against the floor. Daniel followed the sound down the dim corridor outside his workshop. There, leaning against a wall, was a little alien girl. She was small, her skin shining with a faint green glow. Her eyes glimmered as if they held tiny stars inside. She tried to move but stumbled. Her legs trembled under her body, thin and weak. Daniel knelt down slowly so as not to scare her. "Hey there," he said in a gentle voice. "Are you all right?" The little girl looked at him with wide eyes. Her lips moved and a soft whisper came out. "Lyra," she said. That was her name. Daniel could see she was frightened and tired. He noticed how thin she was, as though she had not eaten well. Her legs looked as if they could not hold her weight. He saw the way she leaned against the wall for balance, struggling even to stand. Daniel's heart ached at the sight. He remembered when Claire had been little, how she too had once needed him to hold her steady when she tried to walk. The memory stirred something deep inside him. Daniel reached out a hand, moving slowly. "It's all right, Lyra. You're safe now." She blinked but did not step back. Finally, she placed her small hand in his, her touch cool but gentle. Daniel carefully lifted her up, carrying her into his workshop. Claire, who had been reading by a small lamp, looked up with surprise. "Dad, who is she?" Claire asked. Daniel shook his head. "Her name is Lyra. She needs help." He set the girl on a chair and offered her a cup of water. Lyra drank quickly, as if she had been thirsty for days. Then Daniel gave her a small piece of bread and fruit from their supplies. She ate with quiet thanks, her glowing eyes softening with relief. As Lyra sat there, Daniel noticed her legs again. They were not just thin, they were shaped in a way that seemed fragile, as if her body was not made to handle the gravity of the station. Each small movement made her wince, though she tried to hide it. Claire, curious and kind, walked over and placed a blanket around Lyra's shoulders. "Don't worry," she said with a smile. "You can stay here." Lyra's lips curved into a small smile. For the first time that night, she let out a little laugh, quiet but real. Daniel, however, could not stop his thoughts from racing. Who had left this child alone in the busy station? Why had no one cared for her? He asked a few questions, but Lyra only shook her head, unwilling or unable to answer. She spoke so little, only giving her name and a few broken words. Still, Daniel saw enough. She was lost, alone, and struggling to walk. He made a decision then and there. He would not let her return to the cold corridors. She would stay with him and Claire, at least until he could find out more. That night, when Lyra finally fell asleep in a spare cot, Daniel sat quietly by his workbench. The tools lay scattered across the table. He stared at an old sketchbook he used for designs. Slowly, he began to draw. Lines took shape on the page. At first, it was just an idea, a thought that would not leave his mind. What if he built something to help her legs, something to carry her weight, to give her strength? The image of her stumbling had stayed with him. He could not ignore it. As the hours passed, the sketch grew into a rough plan for small Exo-Legs, light frames that could fit over her limbs and support her steps. Claire woke in the middle of the night and found him still working. "Dad, what are you doing?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. Daniel looked at her and smiled. "I'm thinking of a way to help Lyra walk. She shouldn't have to struggle like this." Claire's tired face brightened. "Like robot legs?" Daniel chuckled softly. "Something like that. But small, light, and safe for her." Claire nodded with excitement and sat beside him, holding a flashlight to help him see better. Even though it was late, she wanted to be part of it. The next day, Daniel asked around the station about the girl. No one seemed to know her. Some traders claimed they had never seen her kind before. Others shook their heads and avoided the question. Daniel felt frustration, but also determination. If no one else would care for her, he would. At work, he salvaged spare parts, hiding a few lightweight alloys and small servo motors in his bag. At night, he tested them quietly in the workshop, while Claire kept Lyra company. Slowly, the little girl began to smile more often. She laughed at Claire's silly jokes, even if she still spoke very little. But Daniel noticed something else. Sometimes, when Lyra thought no one was watching, her eyes grew distant. She spoke in whispers, words in a language he did not understand. It was as if she carried memories far older than her small body. Daniel dismissed it as a child's imagination, but Claire listened closely. "She says things about palaces and stars," Claire told him one night. "She says her mother is far away." Daniel nodded, though he thought it was only a dream of a lost child. Still, he felt a strange weight in her words. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel's design grew clearer. He measured Lyra's legs carefully, asking her permission each time, and drew new adjustments. She trusted him now, letting him work while she held Claire's hand. At night he would look at the sketches, his heart heavy but hopeful. He did not know who her mother was or where she came from. All he knew was that Lyra needed him and he could not fail her. In the quiet of the workshop, with the hum of the station around them, a bond was forming. Daniel, Claire, and Lyra, 3 lives tied together by chance, and by the promise of something new. Daniel did not know that far above, on the upper decks of the station, hidden eyes had already noticed the little alien girl. They watched her movements, the glow of her skin, the strange power in her eyes. To them, she was not just a lost child. She was something more, someone important. And the human mechanic, busy at his workbench with his daughter by his side, had no idea that by taking her in, he had stepped into the center of a story far larger than his own. Daniel's days grew busier after he brought Lyra into his life. He still worked long hours as a mechanic, but now when he came home to the workshop, he was greeted by 2 children. Claire welcomed him with laughter and chatter about her day, while Lyra sat quietly, her glowing eyes watching him with shy trust. She still spoke very little, but her smiles came more often, and when she did laugh, it was soft and warm. Daniel found himself thinking of her not as a guest, but as part of the family. Still, he could not ignore the trouble with her legs. He saw the way she winced each time she tried to stand or walk more than a few steps. It was not right for a child to struggle like that. And so, his idea of Exo-Legs grew stronger in his mind. At night, when the station quieted and the hum of the engines filled the silence, Daniel would spread his tools across the workbench. He worked on sketches, cutting pieces of metal and testing servo motors. Claire sat beside him, holding wires or shining a flashlight. She loved helping her father, and she also loved making Lyra smile. Sometimes she would read stories out loud, her voice filling the small space. Lyra listened, her eyes wide, and sometimes she would repeat a word softly, trying to learn more English. It was during those moments that Daniel felt his tiredness fade away. He was building more than machines. He was building a bond. One evening, as Daniel bent over his designs, Claire asked him, "Dad, do you think Lyra's mom is looking for her?" The question caught him by surprise. He put down his pencil and looked at his daughter. "I don't know, Claire, maybe not. But right now she needs us." Claire nodded, satisfied with that answer. But the question stayed in Daniel's mind. Who had left Lyra here? Why was she wandering alone? He asked around the lower decks during his work shifts. Traders shook their heads, saying they had never seen a child like her before. A few engineers muttered that she looked like she came from faraway systems, places where humans rarely went. No one had answers. Daniel's curiosity grew, but so did his sense of responsibility. He could not solve the mystery yet, but he could help her stand tall. The first prototype came together with parts Daniel scavenged from old drones. It was heavy and not very pretty, but it was a beginning. He strapped the frame gently around Lyra's legs while Claire cheered. At first, Lyra was scared, gripping Claire's hand tightly. Daniel encouraged her softly, saying, "Try one step." Just one. She hesitated, then lifted her foot. The metal brace hummed faintly, supporting her weight. She took a shaky step, then another. Her eyes widened with wonder. Claire clapped her hands. "You did it, Lyra." The little girl laughed for the first time in days, the sound echoing in the workshop like music. From then on, each evening turned into practice. Lyra walked slowly at first, her steps small and careful. Daniel adjusted the braces, tightening a screw here, adding a spring there. Claire kept count of how many steps Lyra could take each day. Soon she was walking across the room without falling. Her confidence grew, and with it her joy. Daniel could see the difference in her face. The glow in her eyes brightened, and her quiet laughter came more often. He realized he had not just given her a tool, he had given her hope. But Daniel also noticed something strange. Sometimes when Lyra walked with the Exo-Legs, she would stop and look out the small workshop window that showed the stars. Her face would become serious, and she whispered words in her own language. Daniel did not understand them, but he saw the sadness in her eyes. Claire asked her once what she was saying. Lyra hesitated, then whispered in broken English, "My mother." Far away. Daniel heard it, but he said nothing. He thought perhaps Lyra's mother was lost, or maybe gone forever. It made him more determined to protect the girl. As days passed, Daniel refined his invention. He traded some of his repair work for better materials, lighter alloys, and stronger servos. The second version of the Exo-Legs was slimmer, with smoother joints. It fit Lyra better and moved with her more naturally. This time, she not only walked but began to run across the small workshop. Claire ran beside her, laughing and shouting with joy. Lyra's laughter joined hers, and for a moment, the workshop was filled with nothing but happiness. Yet not all eyes on the station saw this with kindness. Unseen to Daniel, figures in the higher decks had begun to watch. Rumors of a glowing child had reached their ears. Some whispered she was more than just a lost girl. Traders who had seen her spoke of strange energy in her eyes and the way she carried herself. They wondered if she came from a powerful family or even a royal line. Among those who watched was a cloaked woman who moved silently through the shadows. She visited the lower decks often, never stepping too close but always watching the mechanic and the child. Daniel, unaware of these eyes, focused only on his work and his family. At dinner, he listened to Claire tell stories about her day, while Lyra ate quietly, smiling when Claire made silly jokes. At night, he tucked both girls into bed, one his daughter by blood, the other by fate. Then he returned to his workbench, drawing and building, trying to perfect the Exo-Legs. He wanted them to be strong enough that Lyra would never have to fear falling again. He imagined her running freely, climbing stairs without pain, and perhaps even dancing someday. But the mystery of her past continued to grow. Once, when he was adjusting the braces, Daniel noticed markings on Lyra's skin near her ankles. They were faint, like symbols glowing under her skin. He asked her gently what they were. Lyra looked away and whispered, "Birthmark." Daniel did not press further, but the sight stayed in his mind. He knew they were not ordinary. Still, he kept his promise to himself. He would not treat her differently. She was just a child in need, and that was enough for him. Weeks turned into months, and the workshop became a place of laughter and invention. Claire and Lyra grew close like sisters. They played together, painted small pictures on scraps of paper, and shared secrets. Daniel watched them, feeling both pride and fear. He knew the universe was large and dangerous. He worried what would happen if someone came looking for Lyra, but he also knew he could not undo what had already happened. She was part of their lives now. One night, after the girls had fallen asleep, Daniel sat alone at his workbench. He looked at the sketches of the Exo-Legs and thought about the future. He wondered if he could build more, arms to help with lifting, frames to help her climb. His mind filled with ideas, and his hands itched to bring them to life. He did not know that his actions were already changing the path of destiny. The little alien girl he had given legs to was not an ordinary child. She carried a secret far greater than he could imagine, and somewhere on the station her true mother watched from the shadows, waiting for the right time to reveal herself. Daniel worked harder on the Exo-Legs each day, and his workshop soon became a place full of laughter and small victories. Lyra was no longer the frightened, trembling child who had stumbled into his life. With the help of his inventions, she began to move with more confidence. The first clumsy steps had turned into walking across the room, and now she could climb the short stairs at the side of the workshop. Claire celebrated every achievement as though it was her own, clapping and hugging Lyra after each success. Daniel watched them both with quiet pride. He had always wanted to give his daughter a safe home, but now he found himself protecting another child as well. His life felt fuller, though he did not realize how much it was changing. The workshop was small and cluttered, filled with old machine parts and the hum of tools. But to the children it became a playground. Claire showed Lyra how to draw with scraps of chalk, covering the walls with simple pictures of stars and ships. Lyra smiled shyly, and sometimes she added strange symbols Daniel did not understand. When he asked, she only said softly, "My language." Daniel let it go. She had her secrets, and he would not force her to share. For him, it was enough that she was smiling more each day. The Exo-Legs grew more advanced as Daniel continued to refine them. He tested new alloys, balanced the joints, and adjusted the straps until they fit Lyra perfectly. One evening, when the design felt strong enough, he strapped the new pair onto her. She stood taller than ever before. Claire clapped her hands and cheered. "You look amazing." Lyra laughed and took her first confident steps across the workshop floor. She moved quickly, almost running, before stopping in surprise. Her eyes filled with tears, not of pain but of joy. She whispered, "Thank you." Daniel knelt down and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did this, Lyra. You had the courage to try." It was a moment Daniel would never forget. Yet even as joy filled the workshop, shadows crept closer. On the higher decks of the station, rumors of a glowing child spread quickly. Traders whispered about the mechanic who had taken in a strange alien girl. Some described her eyes that held starlight. Others spoke of the marks on her skin. To many it was just gossip. But to those who knew the truth, the whispers were dangerous. There were factions in the galaxy that would seek her out. And Daniel had no idea he was protecting someone far more important than a lost child. That night, as the station lights dimmed, a cloaked figure walked silently along the lower decks. She moved with grace, her steps soft, her presence hidden. Her eyes searched the corridors until she found the workshop window. Through it, she saw Lyra standing proudly in her new Exo-Legs, Claire clapping beside her, and Daniel smiling with quiet satisfaction. The figure's heart stirred and a tear slipped down her cheek. She was the true mother of the child, and she had been watching from afar. But she did not enter. Not yet. Inside, Daniel was unaware of the eyes upon them. He was busy tightening the bolts on the Exo-Legs while Claire fetched him tools. Lyra tried to take longer steps, her small hands reaching out for balance. She stumbled once, but Claire caught her, laughing. "I've got you." Lyra laughed too, a bright sound that filled the room. Daniel smiled and wiped the sweat from his brow. "Good job, both of you," he said. In that moment, he felt like life was simple again. A father, 2 children, and a small workshop filled with light. He did not know how fragile that peace was. The following days brought more progress. Daniel added small stabilizers to the Exo-Legs, allowing Lyra to walk for longer without tiring. She practiced every morning, determined to grow stronger. Claire encouraged her, counting steps and shouting when she reached new goals. Other workers on the lower decks noticed too. They saw the little alien girl walking where once she could barely stand. Some smiled at the sight, touched by the kindness of the human mechanic. Others whispered more rumors, uncertain of who she really was. Daniel ignored the gossip. He cared only for the girl's progress and her happiness. One afternoon, Claire and Lyra played near the workshop while Daniel repaired a broken drone. The girls laughed and chased each other, Lyra's Exo-Legs whirring softly with each step. For the first time, Daniel saw her running like any other child. His heart swelled with pride. But as he turned back to his work, he noticed a figure at the end of the corridor watching them. The figure was cloaked, standing still in the shadows. Daniel frowned, but when he looked again, the figure was gone. He told himself it was just a passerby, but the image stayed in his mind. That night, as the girls slept, Daniel sat alone with his thoughts. He remembered the look on Lyra's face when she had spoken of her mother. He remembered the strange symbols she sometimes drew. And he thought about the figure he had seen watching them. His instincts told him something was coming, something bigger than he understood. But he pushed the thought away and returned to his workbench. He could not solve mysteries he did not understand. What he could do was make Lyra's life better, one invention at a time. The next morning, Daniel introduced a new feature on the Exo-Legs, small shock absorbers to help her jump. Lyra was nervous at first, but with Claire's encouragement, she tried. She bent her knees and pushed upward, the Exo-Legs giving her a boost. She rose off the ground and landed safely. Claire clapped wildly. "You did it! You jumped!" Lyra's laughter rang out, and Daniel felt his chest tighten with pride. She was growing stronger each day. He thought of all the possibilities, climbing, running, maybe even dancing. The thought filled him with hope. But while Daniel dreamed of her future, the station whispered of her past. More and more people spoke of the child with glowing skin. Some claimed she was a lost princess. Others said she carried ancient power. Daniel ignored the talk, but it spread faster than he realized. The cloaked woman heard it too, and her heart ached. She longed to step forward, to hold her daughter and reveal the truth. But she knew the dangers. If enemies learned where the child was, they would come. And so she stayed in the shadows, watching as the human mechanic gave her daughter a gift she could not. One evening, as the workshop lights glowed, Daniel finished another adjustment on the Exo-Legs. Lyra walked confidently across the floor, her steps steady and sure. Claire ran beside her, their laughter blending together. Daniel leaned against his workbench, smiling. He did not know that far above, on the station's higher decks, powerful eyes were turning toward him. They had heard the rumors, and they would soon come searching. For now, though, the workshop was filled with light, and Daniel believed he had given a little girl the chance to live like any other child. He did not yet see that he had stepped into a story much larger than his own. The days on the station passed quickly as Daniel kept working on Lyra's Exo-Legs. He thought he was simply helping a lost child, but the truth was much greater than he knew. Lyra grew stronger each day. She laughed more, she spoke more, and she walked with growing pride. Claire treated her like a sister, and Daniel began to feel as if his family had quietly grown by one. But unseen forces were moving, and the quiet workshop was about to become the center of something far larger. One evening after dinner, Claire went to bed while Lyra stayed awake a little longer. Daniel adjusted the Exo-Legs and asked her to try walking again. She moved across the workshop floor with steady steps, and for the first time, she climbed the narrow stairs that led to the observation deck. Daniel followed close behind, ready to catch her if she fell. At the top, she looked out at the endless stars beyond the window. Her eyes glowed softly, reflecting the starlight. She whispered words in her own language, words Daniel could not understand, but he could hear the longing in her voice. Then, from the shadows at the edge of the observation deck, a tall cloaked figure appeared. Daniel froze. He had seen someone watching from a distance before, but now the figure was here. Lyra turned and gasped softly. Her glowing eyes widened, and then she whispered a single word. "Mother." She stumbled forward, her Exo-Legs whirring as she moved into the arms of the cloaked woman. The woman dropped her hood, revealing her face. She was tall, regal, and her features carried the same glow as Lyra's, though more powerful, more commanding. Tears filled her eyes as she held her daughter close. Daniel stood in silence, stunned. He had not expected this. He had thought Lyra's parents were lost or gone, but here was her mother, alive and real, standing before him. The woman whispered to Lyra in their own language, her voice soft and trembling. Lyra answered with joy, clinging tightly to her. Daniel looked at them both and felt a mix of relief and confusion. He had cared for this child, built her a way to walk, and now her true mother had come. What did that mean for him and for Claire? The woman finally turned her eyes toward Daniel. Her gaze was powerful, filled with authority. She spoke in clear English, her voice calm but heavy with emotion. "You cared for my daughter when I could not. You gave her more than I ever could. You gave her freedom." Daniel, still shocked, shook his head. "I only did what anyone would have done. She needed help." The woman smiled faintly, though her eyes were wet. "Not anyone. Many would have turned away, but you did not. For that I thank you." Daniel did not know what to say. He looked at Lyra, who smiled at him, still holding her mother's hand. In that moment, he felt both joy and sadness. Joy that Lyra had her family back, but sadness that perhaps she would leave him and Claire. He had not realized how much he cared for her until now. He wanted her to be safe, even if it meant saying goodbye. The woman sensed his thoughts. "You fear losing her," she said softly. "But know this. You have become part of her life in a way no one can change. She will always remember what you gave her." Daniel nodded slowly, unsure what the future held. He asked quietly, "Who are you?" The woman hesitated, then answered, "I am the Empress of a star empire. My daughter is my heir. Enemies hunted her, so I hid her among the traders of this station. But she was alone. I thought it was safer that way. I was wrong." The words struck Daniel hard. He looked at Lyra, who leaned against her mother, glowing softly. He realized now that she was no ordinary child. She carried a destiny far greater than he had imagined. And yet to him, she was still just the little girl who had stumbled into his workshop, weak and frightened, needing a helping hand. The Empress stepped closer, her regal presence filling the small space. She placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "I watched you from the shadows. I saw how you cared for her. You showed her kindness without knowing who she was. That is something even I could not give." Daniel swallowed, feeling the weight of her words. He wanted to ask why she had not come sooner, but he kept silent. It was not his place to question her choices. For the next few days, the Empress visited in secret. She came at night, speaking with Lyra and watching her practice with the Exo-Legs. She did not reveal herself to others on the station. Only Daniel and Claire knew. Claire was at first frightened, but soon she saw the truth. Lyra's mother loved her deeply. Claire asked her many questions, and the Empress answered kindly. She treated Claire with gentle respect, as though she too were important. The workshop became a strange place where royalty and simplicity met, yet danger grew closer. Rumors spread faster than ever. Whispers of the glowing child reached the ears of those who hunted the royal line. One night, as Daniel worked on improvements to the Exo-Legs, he noticed strange movements outside the workshop. Figures in dark uniforms passed by more often. Their eyes lingered too long. Daniel's instincts told him something was wrong. He tried to hide his worry from Claire and Lyra, but the tension grew. The Empress knew too. One night she told Daniel in a low voice, "They will come for her. I cannot hide her much longer, but until then, you must protect her." Daniel felt a chill. "Me? I'm just a mechanic. I can't fight soldiers." The Empress looked at him with steady eyes. "You have already fought for her, with your heart and your hands. That is more powerful than weapons. Do not doubt that." Her words gave Daniel courage, though fear still pressed at his chest. As the days passed, Lyra grew even stronger. With Daniel's help, she could now walk, run, and even climb the stairs with ease. The Exo-Legs were no longer just braces. They were part of her. She moved with joy, her laughter filling the workshop. Daniel and Claire cheered her on, proud of every step. And the Empress watched with silent tears, seeing her daughter live as a child again. For the first time in a long time, Lyra was happy. But the peace could not last. Strange ships began docking at the station, their crews asking questions about a child with glowing eyes. Workers on the lower decks grew nervous. Daniel noticed more strangers near his workshop watching too closely. He tried to ignore them, but the truth was clear. The secret was out. The Empress knew it as well. One evening, she stood before Daniel and said, "The time has come. Soon I will have to take her back. But know this, because of you, she will face her future with strength." Daniel looked at Lyra, who was asleep beside Claire. His heart ached at the thought of losing her. But he also felt pride. He had given her something no one else had. She could now walk, run, and live like any child. He had changed her life, and in return, she had changed his. He did not yet know that the greatest test was still ahead. The enemies of the Empress were already on the move, and soon the quiet workshop would become a battlefield. The station was quiet, but Daniel could feel the tension in the air. Something was coming. He had lived there for years, and he knew the rhythms of the place. Traders, workers, and travelers moved in patterns he had learned to read. Now those patterns were broken. Strange men walked the corridors asking too many questions. Ships with dark hulls docked at the station and stayed longer than they should. The whispers about Lyra were no longer whispers. People were afraid, and Daniel knew it was only a matter of time before the danger reached his workshop. Claire and Lyra were playing together, drawing pictures on scraps of paper. Lyra laughed as Claire showed her how to fold them into little shapes. Daniel watched them, but his thoughts were heavy. He tried to hide his worry, but Lyra noticed. She had grown closer to him, and she could sense when something was wrong. She asked in her soft voice, "Danger?" Daniel looked at her and forced a smile. "Don't worry, Lyra, I'll keep you safe." But deep down, he was not sure if he could keep that promise. That night, as the station lights dimmed to signal rest hours, Daniel heard footsteps outside the workshop. He grabbed a wrench, his only weapon, and stood near the door. Claire and Lyra slept in the back room, unaware. The footsteps paused, and for a moment Daniel thought someone would knock. But then they moved on. He let out a shaky breath. He knew this was only the beginning. He had to be ready. The Empress appeared again the following night. She came in silence, her cloak hiding her presence. Her face was serious, her voice low. "They are here," she said. "The ones who hunt my daughter. They know she is on this station." Daniel felt his chest tighten. "What do we do?" The Empress looked at him with calm strength. "I will protect her with my life. But you must protect her heart. Do not let her be afraid. Stand by her as you always have." Daniel nodded, though fear gnawed at him. He was only a mechanic. He had no weapons, no training. But he had his hands, his courage, and his love for the two children who now filled his life. The attack came sooner than expected. It was early morning when alarms blared through the station. Red lights flashed and the sound of boots echoed in the corridors. Daniel rushed to the back room where Claire and Lyra woke in confusion. "Stay behind me," he told them. The door to the workshop burst open and armed men in dark armor stormed inside. Daniel gripped his wrench tightly and stood in front of the girls. His heart pounded, but he refused to move aside. The soldiers demanded in a harsh voice, "Give us the child." Daniel shook his head. "No, she stays here." The men stepped forward, raising their weapons. Claire clung to Lyra, both trembling. Daniel raised his wrench, ready to fight even if it meant his life. The first soldier swung his weapon, but Daniel blocked it with the wrench, sparks flying. He pushed back with all his strength, protecting the girls. Blow after blow rained down, but he did not give way. His arms ached. His body shook, but he stood firm. Just when it seemed he would fall, the air around them changed. A powerful force filled the workshop and light poured in from the doorway. The Empress entered, her presence overwhelming. Her cloak fell away, revealing her full form, regal and radiant. Her eyes blazed with power and her voice shook the walls. "Enough!" The soldiers froze, fear in their eyes. She raised her hand and energy surged through the room. The attackers were thrown back, their weapons clattering to the floor. Some tried to rise, but her guards, who had followed her, stormed in and subdued them. Daniel stood panting, his wrench still in hand. He had fought with everything he had, but it was the Empress who had saved them. She turned to him and spoke softly, though her voice still carried great power. "You are brave, mechanic. You protected her when you could have run. You stood against soldiers with nothing but your hands. That is a gift no crown can give." Daniel lowered his wrench, his body trembling. He looked at Lyra, who ran into his arms. He hugged her tightly, relief flooding through him. The Empress knelt before her daughter, tears glistening in her eyes. "My child, you are safe now." Lyra hugged her, but then she turned to Daniel and Claire. She clung to them too, unwilling to let go. The Empress watched this with a soft smile. She saw the bond that had formed and she knew it could not be broken. She stood and addressed Daniel again. "You gave her more than legs to walk. You gave her love, family, and courage. For that, I will always be in your debt." Daniel shook his head. "I didn't do it for debt or reward. I couldn't let her suffer." The Empress placed a hand on his shoulder. "That is why it means so much. Kindness given freely is the rarest gift of all." She then turned to her guards and ordered them to secure the station. The danger had passed, at least for now. In the days that followed, the Empress remained with her daughter openly. News spread quickly through the station that the mysterious glowing child was the heir of an empire. Workers whispered, traders bowed, and guards stood at attention when they saw her. But in the small workshop, things remained almost the same. Lyra still played with Claire, still laughed when Daniel told silly stories, and still practiced with her Exo-Legs. To her, the workshop was home. The Empress prepared to leave soon, for her empire called her back. But before she did, she spoke with Daniel one last time. "You changed her life," she said, "and you changed mine. I hid her out of fear, but you showed me that trust and kindness are stronger than fear." Daniel listened, Unsure what to say, the Empress continued, I cannot take her from you completely. She belongs to her people, but she also belongs here. She will return to visit as often as she can. That is my promise. Daniel's heart lifted at those words. He would not lose her forever. She would still be part of their lives. Claire cheered when she heard, hugging Lyra tightly. You'll always be my sister, she said. Lyra smiled and whispered, always. When the day came for the Empress and her daughter to leave, the workshop was filled with emotion. Guards stood ready and a royal shuttle waited. The Empress walked with dignity, but her eyes softened when she looked at Daniel. Lyra hugged him tightly, her small arms clinging to his neck. Thank you, she whispered. Daniel's eyes burned with tears as he whispered back, walk proud. Lyra, you're strong now. She hugged Claire too, promising to return. The shuttle departed, carrying the Empress and her daughter into the stars. Daniel and Claire watched from the observation deck, their hearts heavy but full of pride. The workshop felt quieter after they left, but it was not empty. It held memories of laughter, of small steps that turned into strong strides, of a bond that would never break. Life returned to normal on the lower decks, but Daniel knew he was no longer the same man. He was still a mechanic, still a father, but he had become something more. He had been part of a story that reached across the stars, and though he did not seek glory or reward, he had left a mark on a child who would one day rule an empire. And in the quiet moments, when he sat at his workbench with Claire beside him, he would sometimes glance at the sketches of the Exo-Legs. He would smile, remembering the little alien girl who had stumbled into his life and the way she had changed it forever. He did not know when she would return, but he knew she would. And when she did, the workshop would once again be filled with laughter, light, and the sound of small feet walking proudly.